I look at current events, I see what's a more popular trending topic at the time. And if there's something in there that really interests me, then I'll go ahead and pick one of those.
I usually will find something that interests me the most, and then I'll find something that has the most resources available.
I usually pick something that I want to learn about.
I always start in Google, with a general idea, and you can narrow it down from there, or start, with the article databases online. And, you have your general idea, and then you can start to, narrow it down to the specifics.
The student experience has shown that for many writers, the hardest part of every research project is the beginning. Choosing a topic is a critical step. A good topic results in a seamless, interesting process, while a bad topic can make the journey challenging and dull. Experts in the field of education have researched and written about this idea time and time again, generating tips and tricks to help students who struggle in this particular area. This video takes case studies of individual writers at varying age and skill levels and looks at the path they take towards finding their direction. So, let's talk to a few writers about how they choose their research topics. Meet Carlene. Carlene is an advanced writer, 23 years old, with an undergraduate degree in urban planning. Carlene is pursuing her PhD in architecture. Carlene is faced with the daunting process of her PhD thesis. At the graduate level, these research projects can be as long as 200 pages, so she has a lot of work ahead of her. She needs a topic that is broad and complicated enough to be written about at length, and one that is original enough to be approved for by her thesis reviewer board. Carlene is at a loss. The process ahead of her is so daunting that she doesn't know where to begin. So, she decides to start by asking herself, what are my areas of interest outside of my area of study? She comes up with the list: running, relaxing on the beach, photography. Photography. Let's see what we can do with from there. Carlene asks herself, how does photography relate to architecture? She starts to brainstorm, thinking of all the steps she and her peers take when they are beginning a process, like, say, designing a building. She asks herself, how can photography relate to or impact any of these steps? Some preliminary research gives her a few ideas, until she suddenly comes across a new topic. Photogrammetry, the practice of determining the geometric properties of objects from photographic images. She starts to think, maybe I can take advantage of my love for photography and incorporate it with the practice of photogrammetry to make architectural models. With the new idea in her head, she starts planning. What do we know? We know that if you take photos of existing architecture, you can use photogrammetric modeling to recover the geometry and dimensions of the original scene. What we want to know: can we pair photogrammetric modeling with an algorithm to recover full scenes and eventually create mock-ups of large-scale architectural environments that we could never use photographs to model before? Together, the two divisions, what we know and what we want to know, help Carlene develop the topic of her thesis: modeling and rendering architecture from photographs, a topic that was actually used and published by a PhD student from UC Berkeley in 1996. Carlene's story is just one way a writer can decide on a research topic. Let's take a look at how other writers go through the process. Meet Kennedy. Kennedy is a semi-experienced writer, 17 years old, 11th grade, with an academic interest in the math and sciences. Kennedy has an AP biology project to do. The project consists of a term paper to be submitted to his teacher and a poster board presentation to be given to his class. Okay, where does he begin? He starts by looking at some of the classic questions that come up when choosing a research topic. What do I want to know about? What is researchable? What is relevant? Relevant. Let's start with that. Relevancy can mean a lot of different things. For Kennedy, in this context, relevancy means what he has been studying in his school biology class. What chapters were covered on the last test? What experiments has his class conducted recently in lab? How can he tie his project in with the overall objective of the class? Kennedy decides to flip through the table of contents in his textbook and look at the most recent chapters they covered. Cells. He looks through the chapter subheadings and decides to look at one he found the most interesting in lecture. Cell division. He goes on the internet and does some preliminary research. Again, Kennedy has to remember relevancy. Where does cell division come up in popular culture? The obvious answer? Cancer. Cancer is at the most basic level the difference between normal cell division and abnormal cell division. Cancer is a health issue that is always in the news and one that impacts a large majority of our population. It is very relevant. Kennedy decides to look for recent news stories related to cancer. He comes across one story that discusses the investigation of a cluster of a particular kind of cancer, osteosarcoma. He decides to conduct a more narrowed internet search. He finds that osteosarcoma is an aggressive malignant form of cancer that starts in the bones. Kennedy is very interested. What is the prevalence of this disease? What is the diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis? Finally, he has a topic: the pathology of bone cancer, molecular biology behind osteosarcoma. Kennedy's process was very different from Carlene's, but others can differ even more. Let's look at one more student and see how they choose a research topic. Meet Brandon. Brandon is an inexperienced writer, 5th grade, 11 years old, and enrolled in a middle school English class. Brandon is asked to write a book report for school. Although the students can choose their own books, because they are only in 5th grade, the teacher gave the class relatively strict guidelines for the assignment. The chosen book must be educational fiction, between 100 and 300 pages, and relating to English or the study of language. Brandon decides to take a trip to the school library to look at some potential books to read for the assignment. He starts to think about what kind of books he likes: fairy tales, adventure stories, romances, etc. He decides to check in with the school librarian and talk to her about his assignment. He asks the librarian for her personal suggestions, given the parameters designated by his teacher. The librarian helps Brandon identify a list of possible titles. He looks through the list, reading and reviewing the summaries, until he lands on one that sounds interesting: The Phantom Tollbooth, a children's adventure novel and modern fairy tale that tells the story of a boy named Milo. Brandon's process was a lot simpler than Carlene's and Kennedy's, but it still involved some important techniques in the topic generating process. Now, let's go over some of the methods our writers used. Carlene considered her own personal interest and thought about writing what she knew and what she wanted to know. Kennedy thought about writing what was relevant in the classroom, popular culture, and current events, and considered topics that truly piqued his interest. Brandon considered carefully the guidelines of the assignment, thought about what he liked to do, and asked a librarian for help. All of the strategies are good to be mindful of when you're faced with the daunting process of research. But remember, everyone has different methods, tips, and tricks when it comes to writing. Choosing a topic is a very personal and fluid affair. Don't just listen to what other people suggest, because what you do is up to you.